Dear ministers, dear guests, welcome to the high-level panel of the FAO. Please welcome our moderator, Joachim von Braun, and the Director of Office in Climate Change and Biodiversity, Kaveh Sahedi.
Good afternoon, colleagues, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you to this high-level panel on food loss and waste reduction. You just had lunch. I hope you didn't waste. We do this panel in the context of advancing the sustainable bioeconomy. Our global economic systems face significant challenges, draining limited resources and exacerbating climate crisis. The food waste and loss issue is an important part of that. Addressing food loss and waste is not only about sustainability, it's about justice and efficiency, as millions of people worldwide still suffer from hunger and undernutrition. This FAO-organized panel will discuss how food loss and waste reduction can accelerate the transition into a circular bioeconomy. Through measures such as prevention and the application of the 3 Rs, reduce, reuse, recycle, we can reduce resource use, minimize waste streams, and add value to materials that might otherwise be discarded. This approach enhances resource efficiency, reduces greenhouse gas emissions, creates new business and economic opportunities, including for women and youth. However, we have significant challenges: technical limitations, weak institutional capacities, but also some good role models, lack of supportive policies and incentives, insufficient investments is also a corporate issue. Those are just some of the hurdles. Moreover, public awareness and education remain critical in driving sustainable consumption and production. We need a change in mindsets. I'm delighted to have with us Kaveh Sahedi, the Director of the Office of Climate Change, Biodiversity and Environment at FAO. Kaveh, let's begin setting the stage with a brief Q&A between the two of us. You have been engaged in this topic for quite some time. So before delving into solutions, let's take a moment and to understand the magnitude of the issues. We need to talk about some numbers here. Why is reducing food loss and waste such an urgent priority, including for FAO? Not just for food security, but the broader transformation of the food system. What's your take?
It's a big question, but as you say, let's start with some of the numbers. Because I think once you begin to understand and absorb the numbers, you begin to wonder why on earth we're not doing more to tackle food loss and waste as part of our climate strategies, as part of our strategies on food security. Around 13% of food is lost post-harvest. That's about 1 billion tons of food that is being wasted annually. If you add to that the food waste side of the loss and waste equation, maybe another 17%. So somewhere in the region of 1/3 of food seems to be lost or wasted. And now this is an enormous waste of resources. It's a waste of labor. It's a waste of scarce resources, water. It's a waste of fertilizer, of pesticide, of all of the inputs that you have. But that's only one part of the equation, because this food loss and waste also has enormous climate implications, right? You have about 10% of greenhouse gas emissions come from food loss and waste. I think it was Shoba from the World Bank yesterday said if it was a country, it would be the 3rd biggest emitter in the world. So this is the magnitude of the problem that we're facing on food loss and waste. And exactly as you said, it's happening at the same time as high degree of food insecurity. You have still over 700 million people who live and face hunger around the world. So this is why food loss and waste has to be a much bigger part of the equation.
And how to move forward to address this? What are the challenges, especially at country level? It's a global issue in global south and north, but what actions?
Well, it's not rocket science. I think it's the same as all the other sectors in a way that have been looking at decarbonization, of looking at the transition. We have to identify what are the challenges and opportunities at the country level on food loss and waste. Many countries don't have any kind of legal framework that would enable action on food loss and waste. Few countries are actually investing in addressing the food loss and waste. Now, whether it's at the consumer end of the process, or whether it's upfront in terms of the cold chains and everything else, the storage and everything else that needs to be in place. So it really needs to be a much bigger consideration in the overall agricultural development investment of a country, and probably a part of the kind of the repurposing conversations that we're having as what are the most effective investments to increase our agriculture, to indeed produce more with less.
Can you relate that to the SDGs, especially SDG 2, 2030 deadline? We're running out of time. How to relate this to the end hunger goals, and what action in the short term?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's actually part of multiple SDGs, right? SDG 2 is zero hunger. You have SDG 13 on climate. You have SDG 12, sustainable consumption and production, where again, this is a specific deliverable, and we're not on track on any of those. But I guess like any other sector or any other thing, you need to have well-identified policies and investments to be able to tackle food loss and waste. And that doesn't seem to be happening. And because of that, I mean, we simply can't afford to ignore 10% of emissions, right? I mean, if this were a sector, it would be under attack, a little bit like agri-food systems have been in the past. So this really is about refocusing attention, understanding the crisis almost that's there, but also the opportunity, right? How can you use that food loss in terms of creation of bioenergy and make it part of your energy-smart agriculture? How can you use that food that is being wasted as part of your biofertilizers, and therefore a central part of the conversation here of the bioeconomy?
Yeah, well, it is under attack. That's why we're attacking it here. What global partnerships could help in that, and what role FAO in those?
Well, when it comes to global partnerships, I mean, we with the support of the German government, are looking to see how can we bring together the sort of the constellation of partnerships and groups that are working on the bioeconomy. And I think that the food loss and waste piece has to be one that we tackle together. We are putting together the global partnership and making sure that this is part of that conversation. But I sense it's got to go beyond the conversation of the bioeconomy, right? I don't hear much about bioeconomy or indeed food loss and waste in the climate conversation. Why not? 10% of emissions. It's unbelievable that it's not a bigger part of that. You don't hear so much of the conversation even in biodiversity and the sustainable use of biodiversity. Again, why not? So I sense that, yes, partnership, but also, in a way, advocacy to understand the magnitude of the opportunity that we have and to embed it in these different processes. Bioeconomy, certainly, but also climate, biodiversity, and beyond.
It's really my hope that the panel, which sits there and waiting, restlessly moving their feet, will address what you are missing. But let me push you on one more point. How far can we get food waste and losses down with reasonable economic consideration? Getting rid of 100% would probably be a waste of economics, but any targets which we should set or can set?
Well, you know, we haven't done the numbers on that, but I'm wondering if what you said is right. Economically, it may be so, but you know, we have the goals on zero hunger. we have the goals on zero emissions and complete decarbonization. Why would we not have similar targets of zero food loss and zero food waste that we can at least have as our aspirational targets? And I sense that that's a direction that we need to move in.
Having a farming background, I know you cannot get every grain that you grow on a field into the mill and into the bakery. So that's where I'm coming from. So relative economics applies, but I think I've pushed you far enough on the numbers. You have really given us a brilliant background. We will see you back at the end of this session with closing remarks, when you will have the chance to critically reflect on what has been said on this panel and the way forward. So thank you, Kaveh, for kicking us off here, and see you soon again here in a few minutes.
Okay.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is now my distinct pleasure to bring you in touch with our panelists. I will call to the stage Leonard Mizzi, Gunther Beger. Leonard Mizzi is the head of Sustainable Agri-Food Systems and Fisheries Unit of the European Commission's Directorate General for International Partnership. Mr. Gunther Beger is the Managing Director of the Directorate for SDGs, Innovation and Economic Transformation, UNIDO. Her Excellency Danila Denaj, Minister of Agriculture, Rural Development of Albania. And Her Excellency Julie Collins, Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry of Australia. And last not least, Ms. Shobha Shetty, Global Director, Agriculture, Food, the World Bank. Please come up to the stage, all of you. Sit wherever you like. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an empty chair policy on this stage. The empty chair will be filled in a moment by Commissioner Sacco. Josefa Sacco was trapped in another meeting. She will walk in any moment and will be ready to address a set of questions. The format of this panel is I will raise an issue. One or two of our panelists have been asked to give the first 3-minute response from their perspective. Then, if they like, other panelists chip in and we move on to the next set of topics. Let me first address a question to Leonard Mizzi and Gunther Beger. Food loss and waste drives several interconnected challenges. Food insecurity, malnutrition, climate change, as Kaveh just mentioned, biodiversity loss, unsustainable exploitation of natural resources, and so on. What areas of opportunity, we don't only want to talk about problems, what areas of opportunities exist to prevent and reduce food loss and waste while supporting the transition towards a more sustainable future? And what are the benefits to be derived from adopting circular models to reduce food loss and waste? And Leonard, what's the EU doing? And Gunther, what's the UNIDO doing? Leonard, please.
Thanks a lot, Joachim, and thanks to the FAO for proposing this important topic. And as Kaveh said, the topic of food loss and waste within the bioeconomy ecosystem is not something which is necessarily automatic, especially when you want to bundle food, biodiversity, and climate. And as European Union, what we have been trying to do is a bit of behavioral economics and nudging between what I call consumer awareness point of view, creating the platforms, and in fact, since 2016, we have an EU platform on food loss and waste. And since then, we have been sort of sequencing on the basis also of what's feasible. So we have had guidelines on EU food donations, EU guidelines on the use of feed use. 2019, we have an EU methodology to measure food waste, because the measurement, the metrics is important, and that is pretty complicated. And since 2023, we have a legal proposal and legal obligations to reduce, measure, and monitor food waste. Just to give you an idea, the aim, because metrics are important, this is the nudging from a legislative point of view, is that we are proposing a legally binding food waste reduction target. CAVE said that 100% should not be overly ambitious, but we have a target which might not sound wow, but it's a 10% reduction in waste during processing and manufacturing, and a 30% per capita reduction at retail and consumption jointly by 2030 compared to 2020 baselines. So there is a methodology which is legislative, and that is also inspired by the EU Green Deal Farm to Fork and a number of directives, the Waste Directive and the Circular Economy Action Programme, and this is the trust at European level. Clearly, on the baselines of the European Union, we have a number of initiatives, both with FAO and UNEP. We are part of the coalition on championing 12.3 within the UN Food Systems Summit process. I think this is an important take home in the UN Food Systems Summit, which we will have the stocktake process in this year in July. This should be more prioritized. And what we have in terms of all Commission services, and I come from international partnerships, is that we accompany countries in the global south to actually invest in infrastructures to actually reduce the waste. Issues, and that's what we have in terms of the global gateway, issues around logistics, infrastructure, post-harvest losses. It's key that your mango, your fresh fruit and vegetables, whether in the West African context, or in East Africa, or in Latin America, you address the logistics, the cold chains, the rural road infrastructure, and you unleash the full potential of digital tools to actually reduce and tackle waste from a climate mitigation point of view. So we have a number of instruments, also accompanying instruments. The question is, how can you reconcile a legislative process, which is more the stick process, and also the accompanying measures to actually support a process of transitioning into more convergence agenda?
Yeah, thank you. Gunther.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, also I want to thank the organizers of this panel to invite UNIDO. Perhaps not everyone knows what UNIDO is here in the room. UNIDO is the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and sometimes in these panels I have to explain, when we speak about food security, what is the role of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. We learned 30% of food is waste and loss. In our partner countries where we work, it's of course food losses are the big issue. And we have countries, this part of losses is not only 13%, but I learned in average it is 20, 30, 40, 50, up to 50%. And of course, and I don't want to repeat all the figures we learned, but this losses is losses against the fight of hunger, SDG 2. We also learned this incredible number of up to 10% carbon emissions. This is the same carbon emissions output like European Union have, this to understand. And of course, and this is perhaps my point here in the discussion, is this is the loss of added value and income. And for that, we as UNIDO, as the Industrial Development Organization, we focus very much on the reducing post-harvest losses. That means storage, that means cooling, that means processing, processing, to widen the agriculture value chain. And I only want to name one other figure. Africa, and now our colleague, Madame Sacco, arrived. Africa, she knows it. We discussed it some days ago in Addis Ababa, imported 80% of processed food, 80%. This is an every year lost added value of 15 billion US dollar. So you see, to reduce post-harvest losses makes a lot of advantage, of course, in income generating, in jobs, in welfare. And that is the reason why we as UNIDO are focused on this. We do this, for example, with programs improving infrastructure and logistics. One of our main programs are the agro-industrial parks, agro-processing zones, where we equip these parks with electricity, with water, with other infrastructure facilities. We're supporting food processing industry not only in Africa, but also have a very good program, for example, in Cambodia, where we support the fishery industry with support of the European Commission. And we now reached that this the fish produced in Cambodia has more or less possibility to be exported, for example, to the European market. There is one problem. This is with the red flags. This has to do with illegal fishery. And we do it also, and that is very important, if we improve quality infrastructure. I met yesterday colleagues from the BVL, Bundesamt für Verbraucherschutz and Lebensmittelsicherheit. And this guy told me that, that not safe food is also lost food. So that is a very important part, and these are perhaps 3 examples of programs where we support our partner countries in reducing these food losses.
Mm-hmm. For quite some time we thought that food waste is a matter of rich countries and food losses primarily a matter of low-income countries. A survey made in Nairobi a couple of years ago suggested that the food not consumed, harvested, brought into households or the retail sector was also about 100 kilos a year, like in Germany. So we may have to reconfigure our policies and address food waste also in low and middle income countries. I would like to come to policies and institutional constraints with our next round of questions and address Minister Anila Denach and Julie Collins, our 2 ministers here on the panel. What sorts of policies and institutional constraints must be addressed to facilitate progress? How do you measure progress? Do you have policies in place in Albania and Australia? So give us your take. Albania first, please. Your background is, as Minister of Agriculture, quite unusual. You have been Minister of Finance too. So maybe you can also link to investment and financing what we need to achieve. Please take the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity to address this panel. I would definitely take more than give in this panel, also from other experiences. But first and above all, I would like to see not only Albania, but the whole Western country, Balkans, as a region that we are looking forward to a process towards EU integration. And as such, the integrated approach of our policies should be seen as an effort of all our 6 countries together. When it comes to the local policies, I will start with the constraints. Mm-hmm. We see in our country 3 constraints. To start with the policies that are not fully integrated. We sometimes, from one country to another, also in the region, have different composition of ministries and responsibilities. And sometimes one lies in one ministry, the other in another ministry. So I think the first point to address in our countries in this process of integration of legislation is how to make these policies align not only in our own country, but in all the Western Balkan countries, be integrated, and then start moving forward towards this adaptation of acquis properly and right, and also getting the best experiences from EU countries. The second and most important is data. Data sometimes misses. We had a very good experience before 90s in our countries, having excellent data, but through our transition, which seems to be a bit long, we have lost a bit the sense of accurate data, and I believe here academia, together with our own efforts, could help to create a momentum of a sustainable data source in order that not only for food loss and waste, but for all our processes, in particular reaching goals on circular economy, we get the right, even decision-making in government, and let aside then budget support for each of the decision-making. Last but not least, I think collaboration on different actors. Sometimes government, and I represent government for the last 6 years in my 30 years of experience, see it as a main role its own. But we have many other actors. And not only central government, local government, I see particularly as a very important role in this process. But we have, despite academia, we have many of the civil society NGOs that could play a very important role, in particular on creating awareness raising on what is food loss and waste. Mm-hmm. How to reach from the very beginning of education, when education starts in kindergartens, on how to raise awareness raising, in particular combating our social norms in the country, where sometimes food is seen to be lost for a good purpose. Mm-hmm. No, independent of how much rich or poor you are, it's about wealth showing. And these social norms should be broken down with the right goals, but education has to start from the very beginning, from the kindergartens, and as well having the right models. And here, as UNIDO is present, I'd like to thank for the support he's giving in Albania, but also to encourage to support more on business models towards circular economy so that others could follow and then we can measure result. Again, for us, EU integration is the only way forward. The process we have embarked are very important for us. We might be late in some implementation, but we can do it right, having the best experiences in the country, in the region, in EU, but also, why not, in other countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think it's time for a little round of applause to our wonderful panelists. Minister Julie Collins, yes. Give us a perspective on policies from down under.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on the panel today. Australia probably starts from an interesting position in that we can produce enough food to feed the Australian population 3 times over. So we're a country that is a net exporter of agriculture products. So 70% of our agriculture products are currently exported. So one of the big issues for us, obviously, is some of the issues around transportation of that food. We estimate in Australia around 7.6 million tonnes of food is wasted across our entire food supply chain. The primary place that it is wasted is in households. 70% of it is edible, is what we estimate. We think there's many opportunities in Australia to really address the problem. So we're looking at diverting food waste from landfill into productive compost and soil improvers. Where safe and appropriate, we're providing mechanisms to facilitate food donations to those communities that need it. And we've got some large charities in Australia, such as Oz Harvest and Food Bank, that actually work with a lot of the major retailers in Australia and take food and provide meals to communities that are low socioeconomic communities, and particularly breakfast clubs at schools for disadvantaged students in schools. We also believe that we need to deliver policies and approaches that promote agricultural development and better incentivisation of efficient production to avoid waste early in the food supply chain. So we're doing things, to give you an example, things like the Queensland University of Technology is conducting a project of biorefining rice husks to produce silica as a renewable alternative to silica that's derived from quartz sand. Our sugarcane industry has prioritised developing and producing biomaterials and biofuels from sugarcane waste. So we're looking at, as part of the circular economy, what can we do and how can we use some of the processing, I guess, in the food production cycle as early as possible, and what can we do with that. We have set some ambitious goals that we think in Australia, so we're implementing a national food waste strategy. We're investing in research and development to support innovation in Australia. We're also set a target to halve our food waste by 2030. And as we've heard, that's not just a role for government, but is an important role for the sector and the industry. And of course, other tiers of government in Australia. We have 3 tiers of government: local government, state government and the federal government. So it requires all of us to play a role in that, together with civil society and not-for-profits as well. So it's about all of us working together to be able to reach our target. So we have also an Australian Food Pact, which is a voluntary agreement where we've got our largest food retailers, our manufacturers and our primary producers to target the food waste throughout their supply chains. And peak bodies in Australia, like the Food and Grocery Council, are voluntary signatories to this, and we all have now this shared goal to halve our food waste by 2030. So we want to work together with the 3 tiers of government, with the industry and with civil society about how do we intervene as early as we can and how do we do that. But the real important role that we're going to have in Australia is obviously supporting households, given that the vast majority of our food waste is at the household level. And as I indicated earlier, with the circular economy and the aim and the goal to reduce plastics is how do we change food packaging that is designed to reduce food loss and waste and to improve shelf life of food, and at the same time reduce our plastics. And that's a bit of a tension, I guess. We need to invest more in the R&D of alternative packaging and different ways of transporting food product around what we have as a large country, but then again around the globe.
Mm-hmm. What role did civil society? Thank you. What role did civil society, NGOs, play in shaping your agenda in Australia?
Well, certainly they've been intervening and they've got a lot of philanthropic money. They also get some government funding and they have played quite a large role. They've got local organisations, as I said, like Oz Harvest and Food Bank. We also have End Food Waste Australia that works, and they're all sort of working to reduce food waste. So they play quite a large role in Australia and they work with those organisations. And a lot of our larger companies, particularly publicly listed ones, their shareholders are saying to them, we want to do this. And so the impetus is also coming from shareholders of some of the major larger companies. So they're then working with the charities to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Minister Anila, coming back to Albania, is there any influence from the aspiration to become a member of the European Union impacting on your policy strategies on this particular issue, circular economy? Is Leonard helping you sufficiently, he and his colleagues? The relationship to the changing political context?
I think it's a joint effort, and it requires budget. And as you mentioned my background, I think this whole process, it would be successful if we also support businesses with the right schemes. Mm-hmm. So one thing is the model, and the other is the support scheme, where definitely with EU support, I believe we have enough instruments along the programs to give to the businesses and even to municipalities. We have the LEADER program to give them the right insight so that they can start implementing step by step these processes. Because of its environmental and social impact, they have to be on board. So I don't think the instruments are missing. The instruments are there. EU had made us available and also are giving technical assistance. We should just make this harmonized through policies and a lot of communication. Thus, academia and many actors, I put non-for-profit, but could be others, could be allied for all this process, because it's a very important role that we all see it as full integration of all of our countries and not only a government role perspective. Mm-hmm. But it requires budget, and budget allocation is important.
Money matters, and I really appreciate that you mentioned academia several times. Being from that side, I would like to bring Her Excellency Josefa Sacco, the EU Commissioner for Agriculture, into the conversation, and you, Shobha Shetty, Global Director, Agriculture, Food and World Bank. Commissioner, you are just coming back from the CAADP update in Kampala, last week, actually. Let's relate the food waste and loss and the bioeconomy, circular economy perspectives to the new CAADP agenda. What are key entry points and actions to enable circular economy in Africa? Your perspective, please.
Thank you very much, Joachim, for giving me the floor. Apologies for the delay. I was in another event with the BML. That's why I delayed, and I had to walk almost 10 minutes. So I'm really tired. I will not talk a lot. I will just say that food loss and waste it's really a challenge, a global challenge, but it's also very critical or acute in terms of my continent. Let me just go carry along and try to share some of the statistics about how is it affecting our economy. When we look at, in terms of the total quantity of food that we lose in sub-Saharan Africa, we can say that we have 37% of post-harvest loss that we are registering on the continent, which means that about 100 million tons per year. Mostly in the grains alone, we lose about 100 million tons of losing our grain during the year. So we have the post-harvest loss also estimates in terms of value. Approximately we lose $4 billion a year. This is very, very important because this amount of 400 million, WFP, they used to do it on humanitarian. Whereas we produce, but we don't, we lose all this. What are the reasons? What are the challenges? Usually, most of our agriculture is a rural settlement. So rural facility, storage, roads, because nobody will do the adventure to put his car, to go to bad road and break his car to go and collect the product right from the farm gate. So those are the issues that we have to look at it. And as you say, that last week we just launched the new 10 years CAADP post-Malabo strategy and the action plan 2026-2035, because we've been implementing this CAADP Malabo, and we look at all these indicators about food safety, post-harvest loss, all these issues of climate change, all these ecosystems have been taken into account. For the past 2 decades, we had our head of state prioritized in 2003 under the Maputo Declaration on food security and investing in agriculture, but we are not making progress. What are the problems? And then we had 10 years after our head of state, they came back again with another policy, which is the Malabo Declaration, which had 7 commitments. Still, we are going to end, is going to expire this year, 2025. We don't make progress. Africa is still that continent that has a poor statistic in terms of food insecurity and also food malnutrition on the continent. Of course, also poverty. So all these indicators, we ought to have end hunger by 2025. And then we didn't see any results, any pertinent results. We know some of the issues because of the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, because we are more than 38 countries are dependent on food import. So 47 to 55 billion a year just in importing, whereas this continent is endowed with all these natural resources to produce food and feed our continent. I know that my friend from UNIDO, the director of UNIDO, we had the World Without Hunger. It was a very productive conference that we need. All these are reflections. So that is why last year, when we presented the biannual review report on the tracking progress about the implementation of the CADEP, which is the flagship program for the implementation of Agenda 2063, our head of state advised my department of agriculture, rural economy, rural development, blue economy, and environment to start crafting a new 10 years action plan, because we believe on the principle and values of CADEP. And we are proud to say that although we are always, in terms of statistic, in terms of status of agricultural food insecurity, but we have very good mechanism, which is CADEP, that other regions don't have. Because CADEP is really a strong milestone for us. So that is why they told us to look at what are the gaps and then bring a bold and inclusive and resilient and sustainable agri-food system transformation for the continent. That is why last week we're able to bring this food system, the CADEP. Under the CADEP, we look at the opportunity of circular economy, which is embedded on the strategy. The circular economy, we look at it at 3 points. At the prevention, if you want to assume prevention, you have to look at the infrastructure, rural infrastructure, to prevent losing. And we look at the reusing and recovery. We have to look at science and technology. Because what are you going to reuse? How are you going to reuse all this technical knowledge? Is very important. And we also look at recycling and innovation. Those are the pillars. So when you look at this the new strategy, we came out with a very good approach, which is the food system approach. Because the CADEP, Malabo Declaration, and the Maputo Declaration, they were just talking about agriculture. They were not talking the value chain opportunity. So this one comes with a very, very bold initiative. We have five core strategic objectives, and which is the normal one, increase the productivity, looking at value addition processing, because we want agri-industry to create jobs instead of our children to come and die, the social impact of the migration of our children, the youth, and also to look at the trade, the intra-African trade, and leverage the presence of this ASLECAF that we just started. I thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Shobha Shetty, we need to talk about financing, investment, sustainable food system development, the World Bank's role, also related to food waste and losses. What's the World Bank doing in that field? Maybe you can also look at the regional banks, the regional investment banks. So there were earlier the comments, we need the money. Do you spend the money?
Yes, is the short answer, but thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this very important and interesting panel discussion. But I just wanted to actually go back to some of the points that Ambassador Sacco made, and as well as Kaveh, before getting to the financing bit of it. I think we need to recognize we are losing almost 1 billion meals a day. So food loss and waste, this is food that should have been grown, consumed, but is lost or wasted. And of course, this is now directly, has an implication for all the 3 SDGs, as Kaveh just mentioned, SDG 3, 12, as well as 13. So But I think also to be able to address any solution, I think we first and foremost need to understand where exactly these losses are happening on the value chain. And our experience has shown that this analysis is very geography specific and very commodity specific. So this is, I think, the first step. So we launched this flagship report a few years ago on addressing food loss and waste, a global problem with local solutions. And this report really helped us understand some of the drivers. This is the first step, incentives and disincentives, to explain why food and loss and waste exist. And it also showed us that geographies matter, economies matter, and commodities and policy goals matter in the choice of where and how to intervene to have the desired impacts. And I also want to go back to the point that Minister Denaj raised. I think this really underscores the need for developing robust systems for data collection and analysis, because this is crucial to identifying where the food loss and waste occurs along the value chain. And it's also important here to leverage digital tools such as blockchain, IoT sensors, and AI to provide real-time insights on food systems and identify food loss and waste hotspots for intervention. But coming back to the financing issue, Joachim, that you raised, I think the recent IPCC report is clear. The world is moving towards 3.2 degrees, but it can still make it to a world of 2.5 degrees or less if food systems is part of the climate strategy. And I mentioned in an earlier panel today, it's not just the energy transition, we need the food systems transition as well. And this can cost anywhere between $200 billion to $400 billion a year to address food systems transformation, depending on the numbers and the countries. And clearly, I think no one institution, it's not just the World Bank or the World Bank Group that can address this, and which is why private finance and new innovative financing mechanisms and instruments are really critical. So at our annual meetings last year, President Banga of the World Bank, they made a commitment to actually double our commitment to agri-finance from $4.5 billion that it is today to about $9 billion at least by 2030. And again, for private finance to come in, we need good evidence, good data, and risk mitigation instruments. We had a great panel earlier today where we had representatives from Mexico, from FIRA, from Paraguay's Development Bank, Rabobank, that really talked about how the de-risking and can really address some of these information asymmetries. So some of the numbers that came out from our report, I think, would be quite sobering. So if you look at food loss and waste, annual GDP lost is close to 12% in Rwanda, about 10% in Kenya, and 9% in Nepal. So this is huge. And similarly, food loss and waste also contributes heavily to emissions, contributing almost 16% of total emissions in Rwanda, 21% in Kenya, 23% in Nepal. So land that is used for producing food is now lost or wasted. And this is about 21% in Rwanda of total arable land, while in Bangladesh it's close to 27%. So once we have this evidence base, and it's great that Kaveh and his team are really working on this, and we need to collaborate and have this available as a global public good. So this is where I think, once we have the evidence in the database, we can ensure that private sector can also come in and do what is needed to de-risk private finance. And as I think has already been mentioned by Ambassador Sacco, prevention is the key, and for this you need infrastructure, whether it's cold chain infrastructure, which has been now prioritized for Africa. We are also working now with several corporates and countries on how best to use public finance, development finance, climate finance, and private finance to really create a package of integrated support to ensure we have integrated solutions. So I think more broadly, these analytics have also helped with scaling adoption of technologies and climate-smart practices, promoting effective climate-smart food and agriculture policy reforms, and contributing to climate adaptation through water management and improved availability of nutritious food and mitigating efforts through reduced greenhouse gas emissions. So I want to end by saying that addressing food loss and waste is not just about reducing inefficiencies, it's also about creating a ripple effect of positive outcomes for the economy, for the environment, as well as for people and societies. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would love to come back to those points which Commissioner Sacco and you, Shoba, just mentioned in a later round. The audience has a lot of expertise here, including the minister from Ukraine. And I would like to call on the minister from Ukraine for an intervention. We know that Ukraine is heavily affected by the war. Could you tell us how this is particularly contributing to food loss and waste? And do you see an opportunity in applying circular economy, bioeconomy aspects for transforming the food system in Ukraine? Welcome, Minister. This will be translated by your neighbor, but I understand your basic English knowledge is okay. So please handle that with the translator.
Good afternoon. Дякую за запитання. Дійсно,
Thank you for your question.
Дійсно, для нас є чітке розуміння, що управління втратами при транспортуванні – це не лише питання економіки, це питання національної безпеки.
We are fully aware that the management of losses during the transportation, it is not only about economy, it is about surviving.
При початку повномасштабного вторгнення у 2022 році ми зазнали втрат елеваторних потужностей зберігання зерна на декілька мільйонів тонн.
At the beginning of the full-scale invasion, back in the year 2022, we lost storage capacities for grain capable of storing of many millions tons of grain.
При під'їзді до столиці України Києва з кожної траси були знищені найбільші овочесховища.
And in the nearabouts of Kiev, the biggest storage facilities for vegetables were destroyed.
І ми побачили, як це нищівно вдарило по економіці, тому що розпочалась продуктова інфляція.
And we could observe how it impacted the overall economy because it resulted in food inflation.
Коли ми збираємо врожай картоплі, наприклад, то за 4 місяці вона втрачає в якості, тому що немає площі для зберігання, і це впливає на ціну картоплі, моркви, інших продуктів базових для кожного громадянина.
And if we harvest potatoes and do not have storage capacities, then those potatoes we would lose their quality within 4 months. And it is not only about potatoes, it is the same about carrots and other vegetables.
І дефіцит потужності зберігання зернових ми почали долати разом з нашими партнерами. І я хочу подякувати програмі FAO ООН, коли ми розпочали роздавати м'які силоси для зберігання, і таких силосів було роздано фермерам на 8 мільйонів тонн зберігання, і це врятувало ситуацію, тому що зерно, яке вони збирали з поля, ми могли зберігати прямо на господарствах фермерів.
And I would like to say a few words about the shortage of storage facilities for grain. And on this occasion, I would like to say thank you to FAO because even in the beginning of the war, we received temporary storage facilities for the grain, which allowed to keep up to 8 million tons of grain. And those temporary storage facilities were distributed among the farmers.
Я хочу звернутися до всіх людей, які впливають на формування політики. Дуже важливо побудувати дійсно децентралізовану систему зберігання овочів, холодильний ланцюжок для зберігання продуктів, які мають специфічні умови, тому що це про продовольчі суверенітети регіонів. Це дуже важливо, ми це відчуваємо під час війни, як ніхто інший.
And I would like to appeal to everybody who could influence the policies. It's very important to work on creating decentralized storage facilities and decentralized refrigerator facilities, for example, for vegetables, because it impacts food sovereignty.
Це стосується кожної країни, тому що це дозволяє керувати продовольчою інфляцією. І це б'є по дуже чутливим верствам населення, особливо ті, які на межі бідності. Тому що ціни на продукти харчування важливі у всьому світі. Дякую.
And it pertains to every country in this world because it influences food inflation and it helps to help a vulnerable group of population because in doing so you can prevent higher prices.
Dankeschön.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister. We all know that this is not just a national, but it's a global consequence of the war on the world food system. It has shown the vulnerabilities of the overall system. Many countries in food importing countries have suffered consequences in 22-23 and continue to do so. I would like to briefly come back to connect Gunther and Lennart to what we have heard from Africa and the World Bank. In the meantime, colleagues in the audience, get ready for a brief question and answer session. There will be roaming microphones, I hope. So you will have an opportunity to address this great panel. Gunther, you have heard initiatives from Africa, financing and governance issues emphasized by the World Bank. Your take on what you have heard from our two colleagues?
To be honest?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that for a change? No. This is, no. We are among us.
I want to tell you one example from yesterday. Yeah. If we speak about investment in, or let me start in another way. If you speak about investment, I think in avoiding food losses, and this is what I know better. I have to check your figures about food waste in our partner countries. Of course, these investments are more expensive. These investments are in general more risky and perhaps also more challenging. And one example is I met yesterday an important donor of UNIDO. I do not tell whom. And I came with an approach of strengthening the value chain of cotton in West Africa. So, and then I heard from this colleague, I very much appreciate him, very interesting, but please come with a bank. Please come with a financing institution. And I had the chance, after this meeting, 1 hour later, to meet a colleague from a very important international financial institution. And I made the same proposal. And this person told me, please come back with a TA, with a TA approach. And of course, so what I wanted to describe is, in theory, this is all good. But in the practice, it is challenging. And it is challenging especially because most of our partner countries, we have 80%, 90%, we have informal sector, we have small and medium enterprises. We have this missing middle of $20,000 to 2 million. It's very, very difficult to get financing. So, of course, I think in theory it's very good, But in the Brexit, yeah, I see a lot of challenges.
Leonard, do you come out more optimistic?
No, first of all, I would like to react to what the Ukrainian minister said and all the support that the European Union in terms of the solidarity that we have been showing since 2022. And as you know, the Polish presidency has just started, and looking at the Ukraine and what FAO can do would be also a priority in the coming months, because I think the issue of infrastructure and what happened after the Black Sea Grain Initiative, which was suspended, and how we had to rejig a bit the solidarity lanes from an infrastructure point of view. This is not only for Ukraine, but also for the global supply chains. I come to you, what Gunther and both Sheba and Commissioner Sako. De-risking, and I think what we haven't discussed is, we did it indirectly, is de-risking the aspect of food loss and waste in the complexity. I think what Minister from Australia, this multi-stakeholder approach is key, but doing multi-stakeholder approaches from a business case point of view in a systems thinking, that's not easy, especially because bankability of an ecosystem which bundles hard infrastructure, which is ports, cold storage, first of all, this is big funding, and soft infrastructure, which is also training, handling, food safety, extension services, support of the agri-processing retail sector, that's complicated business. Because it's easy to say systems thinking, bundling, and investment. But that's why we have the baselines. The data is important, first of all. We need the data. But we need what was said earlier on, the commodity specificities. For example, something which we are really interested in, and I think even Australia has a lot of offer, because I think there are issues around green fertilizers in Africa. These are the things where we need evidence. Because even academia come to tell me, Leonard, we are interested in green ammonia. What's the bankability of green ammonia and rolling it out at scale? These are the issues where I think there are business opportunities, where possibly banks can follow, but linking the bankability with portfolios at scale, which then feeds into the small farm holders, is not really automatic. But we're discussing with the World Bank. I think we have the G7, G20 processes, the multilateral processes, FAO, UNEP, where we can really put food loss and waste, not just as an afterthought, because sometimes this is an afterthought. We say, and there is the food loss and waste dimension, let's try to do something. It has to be within the convergence of food, biodiversity, climate, but we need to have a bit of better structure of how to use the data, the academia, the application of academia to business, and the bankable portfolio at scale. And that's what is relatively missing in the global community, because there is no like one-stop shop where all this is sort of tackled together, also with the financial institutions. But hopefully with the World Bank and with our financial institutions, we can come together to see how to do the business case of these solutions.
Thank you. Colleagues, the panel has another word. Kaveh Saidi has the last word, but now you have the floor. So raise your hands high, because it's dark in the room. Yes, I see the gentleman right there. Ah, a bit more light is good. We don't want to be in the limelight here. It's now you in the limelight. Please, sir, introduce yourself.
Hello. That's the case.
No,
hello. Yes. I'm Kaluzuza Roland Clovis, Ivorian delegation. Delegation of Côte d'Ivoire.
You're welcome.
Yes. I want to thank the distinguished panelists for their communication. What I would like to know is what is the initiative, what is the collaboration between UNIDO, World Bank, Australia, and African Union to resolve the food waste and loss issue? Thank you.
Very clear question. Thank you. Let's add another one. Let's take 2 or 3 questions and then I return to the panel. And I see a sign of hand right here. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Eddie Punch from Ireland, and for many years I've represented the beef farming sector. My question is, do we have good numbers about the different levels of waste, the proportion of waste for cereals, crops, fruit and veg, compared to, for example, meat, dairy products? And even in terms of meat then, do we have an understanding of the different waste levels in expensive red meats versus maybe cheaper white meats? And I suppose I say all of this because the question of cheap food is central to this in some respects. If I have an expensive Irish steak in my fridge, it doesn't get wasted. If I have carrots that cost 40 cents, well. So the question really is, to what extent do we need to reflect on the difference between the types of food for waste, and to what extent is food undervalued, and is this contributing to the problem?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. I'm sure the panel will comment on that. Adding up kilograms does not make sense, either from a value nor from an environmental perspective. One more? Yes, please. All the way back, the lady, and then the gentleman in the next round. I've seen you.
Hello.
You are?
Regarding...
You are? Please introduce yourself.
Sorry. I'm Christina Peter. I'm a student assistant at Welthungerhilfe, and I'm currently writing my bachelor thesis around food waste.
Good.
So, regarding national legislations, France was one of the first member states of the EU to implement a legislation against food loss and waste. Do you know of any legislative approaches that seem to be a best practice in the EU? What can we learn from the first attempts to tackle food waste through legislation? Thanks.
Okay. Well, panelists, we had 3 challenging questions. The easiest probably was the first, but we will listen carefully. Do these organizations mentioned by our colleague from Côte d'Ivoire work together in meaningful ways on food waste and losses? Secondly, a data question, facts, and practice aspects in EU and elsewhere. Commissioner, I see you nodding. Would you like to begin and others chip in?
As a Commissioner of African Union, our mandate is to elaborate policies. And this new tool that we just, our head of state and government adopted last week, it's really an important tool because there is a provision, the Post-Malabo Strategy and Action Plan 2026 and 2035 provides several actions to address the issue of food loss and food waste. If we domesticate and we align those policies with the National Investment Plan or the National Development Plan, that's the solution. So the Commission, as a Commission that has all its 55 member states if the members adopt and implement that strategy, I think the solution is there. We can, as a Commission, we can help, trying to mobilize resources to assist our member states. And the good news also, in terms of my department, I'm pleased to inform, with the support of the EU, we're able to elaborate, we were able to develop and adopted last year, 2022, the continental strategy on circular economy now. So if we also domesticate, we follow the same procedures, we domesticate it into our national development or investment program, I think all the decisions are there. Now we have to go through implementation of this strategy that the continent has, because this is the best way of planning and the best way of mobilizing resources for implementation. I thank you.
Thank you. Anyone would like to take on the data question from our colleague from Ireland? Yeah?
The World Bank.
Just to say that clearly the data is important in measuring success. We need the data and we need a baseline, and we've been looking at what that baseline is and how do you measure. There is a shortage of data, like there is for so many things in life, but essentially in Australia, as I said, we have worked out that the primary loss of food in Australia is at the household level. There is clearly some along the food supply chain, and we're looking at that and working with industry on a voluntary basis, but it is primarily about collecting that data so that we can measure success in the future, but also that we can target our best efforts. When you're talking about financing and money, certainly you need to know where you can target, so you need the data to start. Because unless you know where you're going to get the value for money along the food supply chain or in households or wherever the majority of the food loss is happening, you're making your task when you start really difficult, because you need to know where it is along the system so that you can target it and get the best bang for your buck in terms of your expenditure in the system.
I may add, the food loss statistics of the FAO are quite elaborate. The food waste statistics are compiled by UNEP, the UN Environment Agency, also breaking down by the categories which you mentioned. We in Germany have a fairly detailed statistics. The highest numbers of waste are with bakery products, not only in terms of volume, but in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, followed by meat. But those are details. We need standards, and I think nations can help each other, and not on what to measure, but also how to measure.
Right.
Leonard, would you like to come in?
Oh, I think on this data set issue with FAO and UNEP, I think we can do more. Data sets vary, questions between the G20, EU, US, Australia, and the rest of the world. I think we need also to look at the food loss waste dynamics with food inflation. So how do you avoid waste also from an inflationary point of view, so that consumers, it's not a question of willingness to pay for your steak, and then not wasted, and maybe what I call cheaper foods, usually very sort of more fresh and fruit and vegetables, which can be wasted if you don't have the logistics from an electricity storage point of view. And also labeling marketing in terms of end buy dates. This is something where the European Union, just for the last question, the legislative baselines of the European Union are relatively new. I think the question is, how do you use these, what we are proposing as legally binding reduction targets by 2030, and how European Union can actually then converge gradually, maybe on models like the French model. But this will take time, because the question again is between consumer behavioral change, one thing, and the stick approach, which is the legislative. And then how do you track it best on municipal waste, so that you try to have benchmarks which reduce that municipal waste, create the composting, and also show the consumer that it makes sense to reduce that waste. But not everyone likes the legislative dimension, because it's too sort of restrictive.
Okay. I take two brief questions, if there are. I saw your hand was up. Is it still valid? And a quick answer. There's one there, and then we go back to the panel and to the closing statement. Brief question, please.
Hello, thank you. I'm Emable Nshimene from the Center for Development and Research at the University of Bonn. My question regards nuclear energy application in the agri-food industry. I have seen that FAO has collaborated with the International Atomic Energy Agency to improve the innovation in this sector. I would like to know how this upcoming innovation feature in the policy frameworks at the level of EU, African Union, Commission, OECD can also respond, and ministers from other countries if they also have those applications in their country. Because these applications can be used in food preservation, which is useful to prevent food loss and food waste, and it's also useful in greenhouse gas monitoring, and this presents a huge opportunity. Thank you.
Kaveh, you take that up later on. There was one more question over there, please.
Hello, my name is Rita. I have recently attained my bachelor's degree in agricultural science. I'm not currently affiliated with any companies. I guess I have a bit of a naive question, which is we know that most of food waste comes from households. There was mention of a statistics that the waste is as large in Nairobi as it is here in Germany. So I guess my naive question is when we hear about policies against food waste, why is it that the focus is always the industry and agriculture and not sensibilizing the people who live in each country? Because isn't that just going to skew the percentage a bit further?
Okay. Good. Ministers are smiling. Your response, please.
Well, I guess what I would say is we talked earlier about the impact of legislation. In Australia, we've chosen to have a voluntary target, and we've got sector and industry working together, and I've talked about the 3 tiers of government. Some of the local governments are working with households about waste and circular economy and how do they encourage people to better utilise it. We've got an example of the Bega Valley, whereby they've become, or they have an ambition to become Australia's most circular economy by 2030. And they are doing things with local communities, but importantly with local businesses as well as the households, about how do they do that. And I think one of the things you need to be careful about is there's been a bit of a debate in Australia about waste fees and, do you increase them? Do you allow people to pay less to recycle or to reuse and compost, and how do you encourage households to do that, and the number of bins we've all got and how to do that. And the cost to the consumer matters, and the hip pocket. When I was talking earlier about you need to know the data and you need to understand it so that you can invest in the best place. But sometimes you've got to work out whether the carrot or the stick will work and which way to go. So legislating and telling households that they have to do this and telling households that is not necessarily the best way to get households along. Sometimes the best way is to incentivise households to do the right thing and explain to them through public education about why they need to do the right thing. I don't think, many households around the globe, particularly with some of the cost of living challenges and inflationary issues that households have had across the globe, that sometimes saying to them and mandating that you have to do this is going to work, because people will find a way around it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Colleagues on the panel, I give you a 1-minute take-home message opportunity. You may like to skip it, and then I call on you, Kaveh. Commissioner, give us your take-home message.
To conclude, after this conversation, I think that if we really adopt the circular economy, it is the way forward in order to reduce significantly loss and damage, so loss and waste, and then increase the value chain on the continent. However, for this to be effective, as I said, we need technology. We need the technology. We need the availability, affordability, and in the lower income countries for this technology. We also need to support these countries. We have mostly our seeds country, the island countries. We need to support them financially and technically for them to go through the circular economy that will reduce food loss and food waste. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josefa. Shopper.
Yeah, this has been a really stimulating discussion, but I think looking ahead, I think the most critical areas of focus for addressing food loss and waste and supporting this transition to a more sustainable agri-food system really lies in the three interlinked domains, which is robust data systems and databases, as already been mentioned, the innovation and investments, and inclusive collaboration. And just on this last point, and I think Leonard has also mentioned this, I think the whole issue of international cooperation and partnerships, are just really, I think, essential. I mean, we are a lot of people here, all working on our own things, but to be able to really catalyze systemic change, I think we really need to strengthen these platforms that unite the government, private sector actors, civil society. As Minister Collins has already mentioned, this is such a multi-sectoral, multi-dimensional issue. And this is, I think, the best way that we can really ensure the alignment of our goals and sharing of best practices and the pooling of resources, which I think is going to be really critical. And the importance of the regional and global frameworks, G7 and G20 were mentioned by Leonard, as well as the EU's Circular Economy Action Plan, and now with the CAADP post-Malabo Action Plan, as well as the UN Food Systems Coordination Hub. I think all of these, I think we really need to be able to leverage them much more effectively to harmonize our efforts and really accelerate sort of our collective action. And I think towards this, I've already reached out to Kave's team yesterday to be able to really sort of do some joint work together on this so that we really bring some of this analysis and data as a global public good. Thanks.
Thank you. Julie Collins.
Thank you. As I indicated earlier, I do think that it is all of us working together better. It is about us sharing data and knowledge, but it is critically going to be about innovation and technology. That is going to be the way forward. And it's going to be about educating the masses and the households about why this is important. It's not just about food waste, it's not just about food security, it's not just about feeding people, it's not just about carbon emissions, but this is about the planet we live on, and we all need to play a role in it, and it's going to be difficult, and we have to find a way that we don't disenfranchise particularly low-income people as we go along that journey.
Great, thank you. Anila.
Without the need to repeat, but only to add, I think despite the complexity that it carries, we should start from simple acts. Sharing information. I would bring my own experience. When I first heard about this, I was engaged in this role as the Minister of Agriculture. And 3 data from this panel last year brought me closer to the subject. Imagine if this information with 3 data can go everywhere. Then social norms, barriers will disappear, because all of us want to live in a planet that is better and overpass our social barriers for a greater good. But we should reach to everyone easier, simpler, and with 3 data. What is the impact of this new perspective that we aim without making it more complex for the common communication with everyone? Thank you.
Thank you. Gunther.
Even with 63 years, I learned some new figures. And for example, 100 million ton grain losses in Africa, like Josephine mentioned, $4 billion every year in Africa, 1 billion meals. I think this was also one figure. So I hope that from this panel discussion is something like, this is a call for more action. Call for more action. Perhaps sometimes less papers, less plans, but more concrete action. And of course, and I support my colleague from the World Bank and also Leonard, we have to join forces and to combine our forces. I think if we do it, and sometimes a little bit more brave, in a brave way, then we come to a little bit more success.
Thank you. Lennart.
We have sufficient structures out there. We have global alliances on circular economy. We have platforms. We have baselines, although the data can be clearly enhanced. I think we should use the next 6 months. We have the next UN Food Systems Summit, normally in Addis in July. Let's put food loss and waste also at the core. If we speak about Côte d'Ivoire, let's also give solutions of what Côte d'Ivoire can do, or what Benin can do, or Togo, or Kenya, in a constructive way of a solutions-based orientations and a more multi-stakeholder, but also where academia, where research, which is important, can make bankability more easy, and where public and private investment can be enhanced, because at the end, it's a question of scaling up investment across the whole value chain.
Thank you. Panelists, you stay in your seats. I ask Kaveh now to come up, speak from here with your closing statement. After all, this is an FAO session. There are no stairs. You can jump up there if you want. Yes, you are doing that. Please, your FAO take-home messages, please.
Joachim, thank you so much. And it's not a summary because, in a way, we've had multiple mini summaries. But as you've all heard, there are some commonalities that ran throughout this conversation. The first of those is that we have to better understand the magnitude of the problem, or probably put better, we have to better understand the magnitude of the opportunity, right? And that's where the incentive lies. So the data and metrics are important, and of course we heard that we need specificity. You cannot compare your steaks and carrots all at the same time. I think the second thing that came through is that ultimately we do need to set ambitious targets. It doesn't answer your question of how much of that 10% should we be targeting, and it's very context specific, whether it's binding or voluntary targets, but targets help us. They give us a sort of a North Star to move towards. So that setting those targets is important, and it's a recognition that this is an issue, this is an opportunity. Following that, of course, there's always the tricky work of the enabling framework and the legislation, the standards, the policy coherence, making sure that our policies are not going in opposite directions. And a part of that, of course, is about creating the right incentives, not just the carrots, not just the sticks, but the carrots have to be a part of it. We heard a lot about many of the things that require a lot of investment, right? The infrastructure, the storage, including the decentralized storage that the minister from Ukraine talked about, the supply chains, the cold chains. This is investment, but this is worthwhile investment that needs to be a part of this sort of agri-finance, and also part of maybe the repurposing conversation that we're having. If money is taken away from here, this kind of subsidy, well, it should be going into there. And certainly the supply chains and the infrastructure is a good investment. It's not just a good agri-food investment, it's a good climate investment as well. Of course, at the end of the day, everybody has to be a part of this. You cannot legislate your way out of food loss and waste alone. That inclusive collaboration that our panelists talked about, at the heart of which, maybe more than we realized before, is the consumer, right? Even in the African continent, as Joachim reminded us, we have to have the consumer understanding and very much on board. Education, etc. It's all part of the game, and it came through, I think, very, very clearly and very helpfully from the comments. And maybe, Joachim, I can end there, and I didn't address the colleague. I'll talk to the colleague who wants to know about FAO, IAEA. Collaboration is good. We have a center, we have an initiative called Atoms for Food, so we'll talk about it after the session. But I think the take-home, Joachim, the take-home is very clear. It's that, put simply, we cannot achieve our climate mitigation targets We cannot achieve our zero hunger targets. We cannot achieve the SDGs unless we deal with food loss and waste. You know, it's as simple as that. So this is worth political attention, and we're grateful, of course, for this forum, the GFFA, to have given us the opportunity to talk about it, to raise the issue, and of course to benefit from so much understanding, experience and knowledge from the panelists and of course from yourself as our moderator, Joachim.
Thank you very much. Well, this was a brilliant summary. The message is invest, and ladies and gentlemen, honor the daily bread, don't throw it away. Thank you all.